The crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber captured the distant light of 27 stars, casting prismatic patterns across the assembled delegates. Ambassador Myra Solis adjusted her formal diplomatic attire, the standard-issue midnight blue uniform with Earth's insignia emblazoned on the left shoulder, as she took her position at the human delegation's podium. It was the 400th annual assembly and humanity's 64th year of representation. Still considered newcomers by most species, humans occupied the outermost ring of the chamber, furthest from the elder races who had founded the council millennia ago. Earth's contribution to interstellar medicine remains unparalleled for a species of their development stage, droned high-speaker Volath, an ancient meridian whose translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Their adaptability to biological diversity has proven most unexpected. Unexpected. The word hung in the air, loaded with the Council's perpetual surprise at humanity's continued survival among the stars. Myra maintained her diplomatic smile, though internally she sighed. After 6 decades, one might think the galaxy would grow accustomed to humanity's knack for endurance. 12 sectors away, aboard Terra Omega Station, Captain Miguel Rodriguez stared at his coffee mug with the intensity of someone contemplating the universe's greatest mysteries. The ceramic vessel, bearing the faded logo of the Terran Space Administration and the unofficial motto, "Regulations are suggestions in space," contained his third synthetic caffeine dose of the shift. The station's central command hub hummed with the usual array of beeps, clicks, and the occasional curse from the engineering section. "Captain, we've got another coolant leak in Section 4B," reported Lieutenant Walsh, her eyes never leaving the holographic display. "Thompson says it's the 3rd one this month." Rodriguez took another long sip. "Did he try the duct tape solution again?" "Affirmative. He's also deployed the WD-40 protocol on the adjacent panels." "Good man. Remind me to put him in for a commendation. Something vague about innovative resource allocation." The conversation exemplified the daily reality of Terra Omega, one of humanity's most important yet chronically underfunded outposts. Positioned at the junction of 7 major trade routes, the station served as an emergency medical facility, diplomatic waypoint, and unofficial cultural embassy. Its staff of 400 performed the work of 1,000, held together by ingenuity, stubborn determination, and liberal application of adhesives never mentioned in the official maintenance manuals. The dual narratives of humanity's existence, the polished diplomacy of the Council, and the duct-taped reality of its frontier, operated in parallel universes of understanding, connected by the thinnest thread of shared purpose survival. Back in the Council chamber, Myra listened as representatives from 14 species delivered statements on interstellar trade agreements. The proceedings followed the same ritualistic pattern established centuries before humans had achieved faster-than-light travel. She used the time to observe the subtle power dynamics playing out around her. The Arctuvian delegation's whispered consultations with the Drex, the conspicuous absence of the Tau Collective's emissaries. Her attention sharpened when Emissary Zothran of the Zoth Imperium rose to speak. The towering chitinous form moved with surprising grace to the central podium compound eyes, reflecting the chamber's crystalline light in fractured patterns. Esteemed colleagues, Zothran began mandibles clicking in the distinctive pattern that the translator implants rendered into galactic standard. The Zoth Imperium has observed with increasing concern the expansion of Terran influence in the Orion spiral sectors. Myra straightened imperceptibly. The Zoth had maintained cool but correct relations with Earth for 30 years. This public statement marked a significant departure from their typical backroom diplomatic approach. Humanity's biological adaptability, while impressive, presents unquantified risks to established biosphere protocols, continued Zothran. Their colonies express biological and cultural contamination patterns unprecedented in Council records. The chamber remained silent, the characteristic stillness that preceded diplomatic incidents of magnitude. Myra caught the eye of her assistant diplomat first-class Talia Ngoye, who subtly activated her datapad to record and analyze Zothran's statement for potential treaty violations. Therefore, Zothran's voice rose in pitch, a sign of emotional intensity rarely displayed in council proceedings. The Zoth Imperium formally proposes containment protocols for human expansion and the immediate cessation of their research activities in sectors adjacent to Imperial territory. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Containment protocols were the diplomatic precursor to authorized military engagement, an effective declaration of hostilities wrapped in procedural language. Myra maintained her composed expression, but her heart raced. The Zoth commanded the third-largest fleet in known space, and their technological superiority over Earth's defenses was significant. Behind Zothran, the previously absent Tau Collective representatives slipped quietly into their seats, a choreographed entrance that suggested pre-arranged support for the Zoth position. As procedural rules required High Speaker Voloth turned toward the human delegation. The Council recognizes Ambassador Solace of Earth for response. Myra rose her mind, calculating diplomatic options, even as she stepped toward the response podium. The familiar weight of representing 8 billion humans settled on her shoulders. On Terra Omega, Captain Rodriguez had just finished authorizing a series of mainframe patches that would hopefully prevent the life support systems from playing "Never Gonna Give You Up" every time the oxygen recyclers activated. A practical joke from the previous engineering team that had proven surprisingly difficult to remove. "Captain," called Communications Officer Martinez, her voice unnaturally tight. "Priority message from TSA Command. Authentication code Omega Red." The command center fell silent. Omega Red signified the highest emergency status, short of actual warfare. On screen, Rodriguez ordered setting down his coffee and straightening his rumpled uniform jacket. The central display flickered, replacing the station schematics with the stern face of Admiral Hassan, Director of Emergency Operations. "Captain Rodriguez, as of 0900 Galactic Standard Time, all TSA facilities are operating under protocol imminent. Your station will receive inspection personnel within the next 12 hours. Rodriguez felt his stomach drop. "Inspection personnel, sir." "The inspectors are coming, Captain. This is not a drill." Hassan out. The display returned to station schematics, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Lieutenant Walsh was the first to recover, whispering with horror. "The inspectors, but we're not scheduled for evaluation until next year." Rodriguez stared at the space where Admiral Hassan's face had been, then glanced around the command center with new eyes, seeing the hastily repaired console panels, the unauthorized coffee station the emoji stickers used to mark malfunctioning systems, the pizza delivery advertisement still taped to the emergency protocols display. Sound General Quarters," he said quietly. "All department heads to report to the command center immediately. And somebody get that damn pizza menu off the emergency systems board." As alarm klaxons began to wail throughout the station, Rodriguez added more to himself than to his crew. "We are so completely screwed." Myra stood before the council, acutely aware that her response would set the trajectory for human-Zoth relations for decades to come. Diplomatic protocol offered 3 standard responses to such provocations: denial, deferral, or dialogue. None seemed adequate to address the existential threat Zothran had just levied against her species. Esteemed council members." She began, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Earth acknowledges the Zoth Imperium's concerns regarding our expansion patterns. However, we categorically reject both the premise and implications of Emissary Zothran's statement." She paused, allowing the translation systems to catch up, and the impact of her rejection to register across the chamber. Direct contradiction was rare in council proceedings, where ambiguity and deferral were the preferred diplomatic currencies. Humanity has adhered to every biosphere protocol established by this council. Our research activities have been transparent, and our expansion has respected all territorial boundaries. She turned slightly to face Zothran directly. The Imperium's proposal appears motivated by factors beyond the stated concerns. Zothran's compound eyes flashed with an iridescent pattern that the translation implants couldn't interpret, but Myra recognized as anger from her years of diplomatic interaction. Perhaps, she continued, Emissary Zothran could clarify whether the Zoth military exercises along the Orion spiral border are related to today's proposal. The chamber erupted in murmurs. The Zoth military movements had not been officially acknowledged by the Council, though most delegations would have been aware of them through intelligence channels. By bringing them into public discussion, Myra had effectively called Zothran's bluff, transforming a procedural maneuver into an explicit confrontation. Zothran's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. The Imperium's defensive posture is not subject to Council oversight. Ambassador Solace attempts to distract from the legitimate biological security concerns presented. High Speaker Volath raised a phosphorescent appendage, signaling for order. The Council acknowledges both positions. As per procedure, a factual assessment team will be assigned to evaluate the Zoth Imperium's claims. Until such assessment is complete, no containment protocols may be enacted. It was the diplomatic equivalent of a stalemate. Exactly what Myra had hoped to achieve. She caught Talia's subtle nod of approval as she returned to her seat. But the victory felt hollow. The Zoth would not have initiated such a provocative move without confidence in their position. Something had changed in the interstellar political landscape, and humanity was dangerously unprepared. As the Council moved to more routine matters, Myra made a decision that protocol would classify as unorthodox at best and potentially career-ending at worst. She activated her personal communication device bypassing the diplomatic channels monitored by both the Council and Earth's government. "Connect to frequency Death Omega 9, she whispered the command recognized only by her device's neural interface. A soft chime confirmed the connection attempt. Reaching out to Death was never to be taken lightly, but the Zoth threat required measures beyond standard diplomacy. If the Imperium sought humanity's containment, then humanity needed allies of consequence. She only hoped Death would answer the call. On Terra, Omega chaos had consumed the station's operations. Captain Rodriguez stood in the center of the command hub, surrounded by department heads, whose expressions ranged from panic to resignation. "Let me get this straight," he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "We have 73 documented safety violations, 114 maintenance issues classified as critical but ignorable, and an unauthorized hydroponic farm in Cargo Bay. 6 growing what Martinez insists are medicinal herbs." Dr. Sophia Levine, Chief Medical Officer, cleared her throat. "The plants are part of a legitimate xenobotany study, Captain. The fact that they also make excellent tea is merely a convenient coincidence." "Right," Rodriguez sighed. "And the hamster wheel powering the backup communications array?" Chief Engineer Thompson shrugged. "Budget cuts, sir. The exercise program for the station pets was killing 2 birds with 1 stone." "Please don't mention killing birds," interjected Environmental Systems Manager Patel. "We're still resolving the incident with the escaped canaries in the ventilation system." Rodriguez closed his eyes briefly, contemplating the life choices that had led him to this moment. "We have less than 10 hours to transform this floating disaster zone into a showcase of TSA efficiency. Ideas, people." Lieutenant Walsh raised her hand. "We could seal off the worst sections and claim a micrometeorite breach. Safety protocols would prevent the inspectors from accessing those areas." "They'd just come back later," Rodriguez said. "Next." "We could stage an emergency," suggested Security Chief Okafor. "Something requiring evacuation before they complete the inspection. Also temporary, and potentially career-ending if they figure it out." Thompson raised a hand. "What about honesty? We show them the station as it is, explain how we've kept this undermanned, underfunded outpost operational, despite headquarters giving us half the resources we need." The room fell silent, then erupted in nervous laughter. "Good one, Thompson." Rodriguez said, a rare smile cracking his worried expression. But no, we're going with Plan Z, full cosmetic overhaul. If we can't fix it, we hide it. If we can't hide it, we paint it. If we can't paint it, we put a plant in front of it. He pointed to each department head in turn, issuing rapid-fire orders. Okafor Security drilled to clear non-essential personnel from high-traffic areas. Patel, get those canaries out of the ventilation system. Levine, document those plants or destroy them, your choice. Thompson, prioritize repairs that make noise or smell. Walsh, coordinate a station-wide cleaning operation. As the team dispersed to their duties, Rodriguez called after them. And for God's sake, somebody find all the duct tape and hide it. Left alone in the command center, he slumped into his chair and stared at the ceiling, where a coffee stain from 3 months ago had somehow formed the perfect outline of what the crew had dubbed the Great Space Duck. Computer, he said to the empty room, how many regulations are we currently violating by having non-regulation celestial waterfowl portrayed on command center surfaces? The computer's pleasant voice responded, working. Analysis complete. 43 regulations, Captain. Would you like me to enumerate them? No, he sighed, but add it to the list. In the private communication alcove adjacent to the council chamber, Myra waited for a response from Death. The connection remained open, but silent, the quantum encrypted channel revealing nothing but a faint background hiss that might have been the sound of distant stars dying. Death was not, as many species believed, an anthropomorphic entity with a scythe and hood. Nor was it merely a concept or natural process. Death was something stranger, an intelligence that had emerged from the collective consciousness of sentient beings across the galaxy, a psychic manifestation of mortality, given autonomous form, through billions of years of evolution experiencing the cessation of life. Few knew of Death's actual existence as a communicable entity. Fewer still had ever attempted contact. Myra had encountered Death only once before, during the Proxima Centauri crisis, when a stellar flare had threatened Earth's first extrasolar colony. Death had appeared then, not to claim lives, but to observe humanity's response to potential extinction. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon, Ambassador, came the voice, finally. Neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but carrying the weight of eons in its measured cadence. The circumstances are unusual, Myra replied, keeping her voice steady despite the chill that ran down her spine. Communicating with Death was like speaking to the void itself, a void that sometimes answered back. The Zoth. Yes, I've been watching their movements with interest. Death's voice carried a hint of amusement. They believe themselves to be enacting the natural order, stronger species containing the weaker. We are not weak, Myra said firmly. No, Death agreed. Humans are many things, but weak is not among them. Your species has a remarkable relationship with me, Ambassador. Where others accept my inevitability, humans rage against me, bargain with me, try to cheat me at every turn. It's quite entertaining. Myra ignored the philosophical tangent, focusing on the diplomatic objective. The Zoth seek containment protocols that would effectively strangle our colonies and research outposts. They have the military capability to enforce such protocols if the Council approves them. And you wish me to intervene? How interesting. Death's voice carried a smile Myra couldn't see, but could certainly feel. What exactly do you propose? That I claim the Zoth leadership that would be rather heavy-handed even for me. No, Myra said quickly. We seek alliance, not assassination. Your presence at the Council would send a message that humanity does not stand alone. Silence stretched between them, filled only by that faint, cosmic hiss. Finally, Death spoke again. You understand that allying with me has implications. The Council fears me far more than they fear the Zoth. We're counting on that, Myra replied. Another pause. Very well, Ambassador. I accept your invitation. The relationship between humanity and myself has always been uniquely adversarial. Perhaps it's time we explored a different dynamic. The connection closed with a soft click, leaving Myra alone with the weight of what she had just arranged. An alliance with death itself, a diplomatic maneuver unprecedented in council history. As she returned to the chamber, she caught sight of emissary Zothran in deep consultation with the warlord Eternal, the military commander who had recently joined the Zoth delegation. Their posture suggested satisfaction, confidence in their strategy. They didn't yet know that the game had changed. For better or worse, Myra had just rewritten the rules of interstellar diplomacy. She only hoped Earth would forgive her for the consequences. On Terra Omega, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. 6 hours of frantic activity had rendered the station nearly unrecognizable to its own crew. Corridors gleamed with hasty polish emergency systems, displayed current and accurate data, and the perpetual aroma of overheated circuitry and coffee had been temporarily masked by industrial-strength air fresheners that Thompson swore were technically within environmental safety parameters. Captain Rodriguez surveyed the command center, where the staff sat with unnaturally straight postures at their immaculate workstations. All personal items had been stowed, all unauthorized modifications, hidden, all systems running on standard protocols, rather than the jury-rigged solutions that actually kept the station functional. "Remember," he addressed the assembled crew, "stick to the script. Everything is by the book. Any critical issues were reported through proper channels and are awaiting headquarters' response. Nobody innovates, nobody improvises, nobody mentions the hamster wheel." Nervous nods all around. Rodriguez checked his uniform one final time. Properly pressed for the first time in months, all appropriate insignia in place, the coffee stains, successfully treated with a concoction from Dr. Levine that he decided not to ask questions about. Martinez status on our guests. Communications Officer Martinez checked her console. TSA Transport Shuttle, regulatory compliance, has docked at Airlock C, sir. Inspector team disembarking now. Right. Rodriguez took a deep breath. Walsh, Okafor with me. The rest of you try not to break anything for the next few hours. The 3 officers made their way to the airlock, maintaining what they hoped was a professional pace. Not rushed enough to suggest panic, not slow enough to seem reluctant. They arrived just as the internal doors cycled open, revealing 3 figures in the formal gray uniforms of the TSA Regulatory Compliance Division. At their head stood Inspector Eleanor Graves, a tall woman with silver hair, pulled into a severe bun, and eyes that seemed capable of detecting a regulation violation through solid walls. Her reputation preceded her. 20 years in the compliance division with a record of finding violations that stations didn't even know existed. Captain Rodriguez, she said, her voice as crisp as her uniform. Inspector Eleanor Graves, Regulatory Compliance. These are my colleagues, Inspectors Chen and Yamaguchi. She gestured to the stern-faced individuals flanking her. Rodriguez extended his hand. Welcome to Terra Omega, Inspector Graves. We're honored by your presence. Graves ignored the outstretched hand, instead consulting her datapad. Honor is irrelevant to regulatory compliance, Captain. I'm here to conduct a comprehensive inspection of your facility, following concerning patterns identified in your quarterly reports. Concerning patterns? Rodriguez maintained his professional smile despite the cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. Yes. Specifically, the statistical impossibility of a station this size operating with 0 major incidents for 14 consecutive months, while simultaneously reducing power consumption by 22%. Her eyes lifted from the pad to fix him with a penetrating stare. Either you've achieved a revolutionary breakthrough in space station management, or your reporting is creative fiction. I'm here to determine which. Rodriguez swallowed hard. We're an efficient team, Inspector. We'll see. She tucked the pad under her arm. I'll begin with command operations, then proceed to engineering, life support, and medical. My colleagues will evaluate security protocols and environmental systems simultaneously. Of course, right this way. Rodriguez led the procession toward the command center, exchanging a brief, panicked glance with Walsh that clearly communicated, "We are so completely screwed." Back in the council chamber, the scheduled proceedings had given way to an unprecedented disruption. The massive, crystalline doors designed to remain sealed during formal sessions had swung open without authorization. A figure stood in the entrance, humanoid in general form but obscured by shadows that seemed to cling unnaturally to its outline. High Speaker Voloth rose in alarm. "Who dares interrupt the council proceedings? Security protocols have been breached." The figure stepped forward and the shadows moved with it like a living cloak. As it entered the chamber, proper delegates gasped and drew back. Some activated personal protection fields, others began urgent communications with their homeworlds. Death walked slowly to the center of the chamber, its form becoming clearer with each step. It appeared differently to each observer. To some, a skeletal figure in dark robes. To others, a being of pure energy. To others, still a reflection of their own species, in a state of elegant decay. The only constants were the deep shadows that surrounded it, and the sense of ancient, implacable power that radiated from its presence. "I seek recognition from the Council." Death said, its voice somehow reaching every delegate in their native language. High Speaker Voloth's bioluminescent patterns pulsed rapidly in distress. You have no standing here. This chamber is for recognized species and political entities. I am older than your council speaker. I have claimed members of every species represented here." Death's form shifted slightly, shadows rippling. "I have standing wherever sentient life gathers." Myra watched from the human delegation's position, her heart racing. Death's arrival was more dramatic than she had anticipated. A full manifestation, rather than the diplomatic representative she had expected. The council chamber had fallen into shocked silence, punctuated only by the soft hum of personal shields and the occasional whispered prayer from more spiritually inclined delegates. Emissary Zothran was the first to recover mandibles, clicking rapidly in agitation. "This is a violation of council sanctuary. No unauthorized entities may participate in proceedings, particularly metaphysical constructs." Death turned toward the Zoth delegation, and several aides visibly flinched. "I am here by invitation, Emissary. Ambassador Solace of Earth has requested my presence as an observer to these proceedings." All eyes turned to Myra, expressions ranging from shock to horror to outrage. The elder race's representatives seemed particularly disturbed, their ancient forms trembling visibly. With as much composure as she could muster, Myra rose from her seat. "The Earth delegation acknowledges and confirms this invitation. In light of the Zoth Imperium's proposal for containment protocols against humanity, we have exercised our right to seek allied representation." Death is not a recognized ally. Zothran's translator struggled to keep up with his rapid mandible clicks. "This is diplomatic sacrilege." "On the contrary," Myra countered, "there is no regulation prohibiting any entity from serving as an observer on behalf of a member species. The precedent was established during the Arctuvian succession crisis, when non-corporeal quantum intelligences were permitted observer status." High Speaker Voloth's bioluminescence had dimmed to barely visible patterns, a sign of extreme stress. "Ambassador Solace, while technically within procedural boundaries, your action represents an extraordinary escalation. The Zoth proposal to contain my species was the first escalation speaker." Myra maintained her diplomatic tone, despite the tension vibrating through the chamber. "Humanity merely responds in kind." Death moved to stand beside the human delegation, its shadowy presence looming over Myra like a protective shroud. "I have observed humanity since they first gained consciousness on their world. I have walked among them through plague, war, famine, and disaster. They have defied me, bargained with me, raced against me, and occasionally embraced me." Its voice carried through the chamber without effort. "Of all species in this council, humans understand me best, because they never stop challenging my inevitability." The council chamber remained frozen in shock as Death continued. "The Zoth Imperium proposes to contain a species that has survived my touch countless times. I find this presumptuous." Warlord Eternal of the Zoth rose then, his massive armored form dwarfing even Zothran. "Death, or no death, the Imperium will not be intimidated by theatrical displays. Humanity's expansion threatens cosmic order. They replicate too quickly, adapt too readily, and disrupt established hierarchies. Yes, Death agreed, a hint of amusement in its timeless voice. That is precisely why I find them interesting, and why I now formally announce my alliance with humanity against any containment protocols. The implication hung in the air like a physical weight. An alliance with death itself carried existential implications that no military force could counter. The Zoth might command the third largest fleet in known space, but death commanded the ultimate fate of every living being. Myra stood tall beside her unexpected ally, feeling both vindicated and terrified. She had changed the equation fundamentally, but at what cost to humanity's standing among the stars? On Terra Omega, Inspector Graves moved through the command center like a precision instrument, her eyes catching details the crew had hoped would go unnoticed. She paused at a recently patched console panel, running one finger along the seam where hasty repairs had been made. "This panel has been tampered with," she stated flatly. "Standard maintenance protocol requires full documentation and replacement with approved components." Rodriguez maintained his professional demeanor, despite the sinking feeling in his stomach. "Yes, Inspector. We experienced a minor power surge last week. The repair was logged in System Maintenance Report TSO 347. Graves consulted her pad, scrolling through documents at remarkable speed. "I see no such report, Captain. It may still be in processing. Our communication bandwidth with headquarters has been experiencing intermittent limitations." "Convenient," Graves remarked, moving on to examine the environmental control station, where Lieutenant Patel stood at rigid attention. "And these colorful markers on the readout screen." Patel swallowed visibly. "Temporary visual guides for trainee operators, Inspector. Fully compliant with Regulation 228.7 regarding supplemental instruction methods." "Those appear to be emoji stickers, Lieutenant." Graves leaned closer. "Specifically, a screaming face emoji next to the oxygen recycling controls. A visual mnemonic, ma'am. The face reminds operators of the importance of maintaining oxygen levels." By screaming in terror, Graves raised an eyebrow. "It's very effective, ma'am." Graves made a note on her pad and continued her circuit of the command center, each step revealing another hastily concealed violation. The fresh paint couldn't hide the years of improvised solutions, unauthorized modifications, and procedural shortcuts that had kept Terra Omega functional, despite chronic underfunding and understaffing. Rodriguez followed in her wake, offering explanations that sounded increasingly hollow, even to his own ears. When they reached his captain's station, Graves pointed to the underside of the console, where a small photograph had been taped, the one personal item he'd forgotten to remove. "Non-regulation personalization of command equipment," she noted. Rodriguez glanced at the photo. His daughter's graduation from the academy 3 years ago. "Yes, Inspector. I take full responsibility." Something in his tone made Graves pause. She studied the photograph, then Rodriguez's face before making another note. "We'll continue to engineering. I'm particularly interested in examining this innovative resource allocation that appears in Engineer Thompson's last performance review." As they left the command center, Rodriguez caught Walsh's eye, giving a slight shake of his head. The facade was crumbling faster than expected. Plan Z was failing spectacularly. Their only option now was to salvage what professional dignity they could from the inevitable regulatory disaster. In the Galactic Council chamber, the unprecedented confrontation between Death and the Zoth delegation had evolved into a complex diplomatic dance. High Speaker Volath had called an emergency recess, during which frantic consultations occurred between nearly every delegation present. The elder races had withdrawn to their private chambers, their ancient protocols for encountering death, reportedly involving ceremonial preparations that would take several hours. Myra found herself in a small antechamber, with death itself, the shadows surrounding the entity, seeming to absorb the room's light. "You've caused quite a stir, Ambassador." Death observed its form shifting subtly as it spoke. Several species are currently calculating the theological implications of your diplomatic strategy. Was your entrance necessary? Myra asked, allowing herself a moment of candor, now that they were alone. I had hoped for a more subtle announcement of our arrangement. Death's response carried what might have been amusement. Subtlety has its place, but this situation required impact. The Zoth respect only power and inevitability. Two qualities I embody rather effectively. Myra couldn't argue with the results. The Zoth delegation had been visibly shaken, and preliminary reports from her aides suggested that several previously neutral parties were now reconsidering their positions on the containment proposal. What happens now? She asked. The alliance between a mortal species and death itself is unprecedented. The Council has no protocols for this situation. They will adapt, Death replied, as all living things must. But you should prepare yourself, Ambassador. Your career may not survive this maneuver, even if your species benefits from it. Myra nodded slowly. I accepted that possibility when I contacted you. Earth's survival matters more than my diplomatic future. How very human of you. Personal sacrifice for collective benefit. Death's form briefly resembled a human skeleton, before shifting back to its more abstract configuration. This is why I find your kind so fascinating. Most species seek individual immortality. Humans often seek legacy instead, the continuation of their values and kind, even at personal cost. Before Myra could respond, her aide Talia entered the antechamber, her eyes carefully fixed on Myra, rather than the entity beside her. Ambassador, the Council is reconvening. The elder races have completed their ceremonial protocols and are requesting your presence and... She hesitated. Your allies' presence as well. Thank you, Talia. We'll be right there. Once her aide had departed, Myra turned back to Death. Whatever happens next, I appreciate your support. Don't thank me yet, Ambassador, Death replied, shadows swirling. Alliances with me tend to have unexpected consequences. On Terra Omega, the inspection had reached engineering, where Chief Engineer Thompson was failing spectacularly at explaining why the backup power systems included what appeared to be an elaborate hamster habitat connected to a hand-built generator. It's a biomechanical energy converter. He attempted sweat beading on his forehead. Utilizing renewable kinetic energy from, station-approved organic sources. Inspector Graves stared at the spinning wheel, currently powered by an enthusiastic rodent Thompson had introduced as Lieutenant Whiskers. This appears to be a hamster wheel connected to a dynamo, she stated flatly. That's one way of describing the technology, yes. Graves made another note on her pad, which had been accumulating violations at an alarming rate. And this solution was approved by TSA Engineering Corps. Thompson glanced at Rodriguez, who gave an imperceptible nod. They were well past salvaging the situation through deception. No, Inspector, Thompson admitted. It was implemented after our third request for replacement parts was denied, due to budget constraints. The system provides emergency power to critical communication systems when main and conventional backup systems fail. And how often does Lieutenant Whiskers' service prove necessary? Twice last month, Thompson replied. During the asteroid shower that disrupted main power and the subsequent equipment failure in backup system beta. Graves studied the ingenious if highly irregular setup, her expression unreadable. Continue the tour, Captain. I believe medical was next on our itinerary. As they proceeded through the corridors, Rodriguez noticed a subtle shift in Graves' demeanor. She continued to document violations, but her questions had become more focused on functionality than regulatory compliance. When they reached medical, Dr. Levine was waiting with the calm composure that had made her legendary among the crew. The medical bay, unlike much of the station, actually looked professional and well-maintained. Medicine being one area where the crew never compromised despite budget limitations. Dr. Sophia Levine, she introduced herself. Chief Medical Officer, Terra Omega Station. Inspector Eleanor Graves, your facility appears remarkably well-equipped, Doctor. Levine nodded. We prioritize medical resources, Inspector. When supply shipments are limited, engineering and comfort items are sacrificed before medical necessities. A rational approach. Graves surveyed the orderly treatment rooms and fully stocked supply cabinets. Though I noticed several medications that aren't on the standard TSA inventory list. Xenobotanical derivatives, Levine explained without hesitation. Developed on station from our research gardens. They supplement our standard pharmaceuticals, particularly for treating conditions unique to long-duration space habitation. The medicinal herbs from Cargo Bay 6, I presume. Levine didn't flinch. Precisely. Their efficacy is documented in my quarterly medical research reports, which headquarters has apparently been filing without review, Graves noted, scrolling through her pad. Your last 17 research submissions haven't received official response. Typical, Levine said with professional restraint. We've learned to operate with minimal oversight or support. Results matter more than recognition in our position. Graves studied the doctor for a long moment before making another note. Then she turned to Rodriguez. Captain, I've seen enough. Let's return to the command center. I have an announcement for your crew. The walk back was conducted in tense silence. Rodriguez had given up calculating how many regulations they had violated. The number had likely exceeded the computational capacity of the station's main computer. His only concern now was how many of his crew would face career consequences for what had been at heart necessary innovations to keep the station operational. When they arrived at the command center, the full command staff had assembled their expressions, a uniform mask of professional resignation. Inspector Graves took position at the central briefing area, her colleagues flanking her with their data pads at the ready. Captain Rodriguez, officers and crew of Terra Omega Station, she began formally. I have completed my preliminary inspection and reached several conclusions. The room held its collective breath. In the Galactic Council chamber, the atmosphere had transformed from shock to intense diplomatic maneuvering. Death's presence beside the human delegation had catalyzed new alliances and oppositions, reshaping the political landscape in hours. Species that had previously maintained neutral positions now sought private consultations with Myra, while others had withdrawn into isolation, communicating only through automated systems. The Zoth delegation, after intense internal debate, visible even across the chamber, had adopted a new strategy. Warlord Eternal had assumed the speaker's position from Emissary Zothran, signaling a shift from diplomatic to military framing. Esteemed Council. The Warlord's voice boomed through the translation systems. The Zoth Imperium acknowledges the unexpected alliance announced by Earth. However, we maintain that containment protocols are necessary and justified. High Speaker Voloth, who had somehow maintained procedural order despite the unprecedented situation, acknowledged the statement. The Council recognizes the Zoth position. Does Earth wish to respond? Myra rose, conscious of Death's shadowy presence beside her. Earth reiterates its categorical rejection of any containment protocols. Furthermore, we propose a counter-resolution formal recognition of humanity's sovereign right to expand within previously established territorial boundaries, free from special restrictions, not applicable to other Council species. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Myra had just elevated a defensive maneuver into an offensive position, seeking not merely to block the Zoth proposal, but to secure formal guarantees of human expansion rights. Warlord Eternal's compound eyes flashed with iridescent anger. This is manipulation through metaphysical intimidation. Earth brings death itself to our chamber and then demands expanded rights. Not expanded, Myra corrected smoothly. Equal. We seek only what is already granted to the Zoth and other established species. Death remained silent throughout the exchange, its presence alone serving as powerful leverage. Several delegations that had initially supported the Zoth position had visibly reconsidered their representatives, now carefully neutral in posture and communication. High Speaker Voloth's bioluminescent patterns stabilized into the formal configuration, used for significant pronouncements. The Council finds itself in an unprecedented situation. Both proposals, containment and sovereign expansion recognition, will be subjected to full deliberative process. It was a procedural delay tactic, but one that favored Earth. Full deliberative process would take months, during which no containment actions could be initiated. Warlord Eternal recognized the setback immediately. The Imperium protest delay serves only Earth's interests, while their expansion continues unchecked. Your protest is noted. Voloth responded with the formal detachment of a being who had overseen interstellar disputes for centuries. However, Council protocols are clear. When fundamental rights of member species are at issue, deliberative process cannot be circumvented. The warlord's massive form seemed to swell with suppressed rage, chitinous armor plates shifting ominously. For a moment, the chamber tensed as ancient instincts recognized the posture of a predator preparing to strike. Then, Death spoke, its voice somehow both soft and all-encompassing. "Choose wisely, Warlord. Some paths lead to me more quickly than others." The simple statement carried implications that transcended diplomatic language. Without explicit threat, Death had reminded everyone present of the ultimate equalizer that awaited all living beings, and the futility of violence in its presence. The warlord subsided, compound eyes dimming slightly. "The Imperium accepts the Council's procedure," he stated, mandibles clicking in what translators interpreted as reluctant acquiescence. "But we will present evidence of human biological contamination that cannot be ignored. We welcome the opportunity to address any legitimate concerns," Myra responded, inclining her head in the formal gesture of diplomatic acknowledgement. Earth has nothing to hide from factual assessment. As the Council moved to conclude the historic session, Myra felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. Some filled with new respect, others with calculation, still others with thinly veiled fear. By aligning humanity with death, she had fundamentally altered Earth's position in interstellar politics. The immediate threat had been averted, but the long-term consequences remained to be seen. Death leaned slightly toward her, its voice pitched for her ears alone. "Well played, Ambassador. You've bought your species time and leverage. Use it wisely." "I intend to," she replied quietly. "This is just the beginning." On Terra Omega Station, Inspector Graves completed reviewing her notes, while the command staff waited in tense silence. Finally, she looked up, her stern expression revealing nothing of her conclusions. Terra Omega Station is in violation of 173 TSA regulations, 42 safety protocols, and 19 interstellar cooperative agreements, she stated flatly. Rodriguez maintained his composure, despite the devastating tally. "We understand the seriousness of these findings, Inspector." "I'm not finished, Captain," Graves continued. "This station also demonstrates exceptional resource management, innovative problem-solving, and remarkable efficiency metrics despite severe understaffing and chronic underfunding." The command staff exchanged confused glances, uncertain where this assessment was leading. "My colleagues and I have reviewed your actual operational outcomes, rather than merely your procedural compliance," Graves explained, her tone shifting slightly. "Terra Omega has maintained its emergency response capabilities at 98% effectiveness, while operating with 63% of recommended personnel and 47% of standard budget allocation." She set her pad down on the central console, a gesture that somehow softened her official demeanor. "Captain Rodriguez, do you know why TSA regulatory compliance conducts unannounced inspections? To ensure stations maintain standards despite knowing when evaluations will occur," he answered automatically. "That's the official reason," Graves acknowledged. "The unofficial reason is to identify stations that succeed despite bureaucratic failure." The command center fell into stunned silence as Graves continued. "Terra Omega was selected for inspection, not because of suspected violations, but because your efficiency metrics were impossibly good, given your resource constraints. Headquarters suspected data manipulation. Instead, we found genuine innovation." She gestured to the duct-taped console, the emoji warning system, the improvised solutions that surrounded them. None of this is regulation compliant. All of it works. That presents regulatory compliance with a dilemma. Rodriguez found his voice. What kind of dilemma, Inspector? Whether to enforce regulations designed for fully resourced stations or to recognize adaptive solutions that achieve the underlying purpose of those regulations. Graves almost smiled. Almost. In this case, I've made my decision. She activated her pad again, the screen projecting a holographic form that expanded to fill the center of the command hub. This is TSA Special Directive 147, Emergency Innovation Protocol. It provides regulatory exemptions for stations, demonstrating exceptional operational outcomes despite resource limitations. The command staff stared at the directive in disbelief. Lieutenant Walsh was the first to recover. That directive actually exists. It does now, Graves replied, the faintest hint of conspiracy in her otherwise professional tone. Issued approximately 30 seconds ago by the Regulatory Compliance Division, with immediate effect throughout TSA jurisdiction. Rodriguez studied the inspector with new understanding. You created this directive during our inspection. I've been drafting it for some time, Captain. Terra Omega simply provided the perfect case study to justify its implementation. Graves looked around at the hodgepodge of solutions that kept the station running. The TSA cannot continue pretending that frontline stations can maintain textbook compliance without textbook resources. Your crew has demonstrated that the mission can be accomplished through alternative means. She returned her attention to Rodriguez. However, this isn't a complete exemption. Your station must now document these innovations properly. Every jury-rigged solution, every creative workaround, every Lieutenant Whiskers must be recorded, evaluated, and safety tested. Some may be rejected, others may become new TSA standard procedures. You want us to document our regulatory violations? Thompson asked incredulously. I want you to document your successes. Engineer, Graves corrected. The TSA needs to learn from stations like Terra Omega, not merely inspect them. The relief that spread through the command center was palpable. Rodriguez straightened his uniform, a genuine smile replacing the professional mask he'd maintained throughout the inspection. We'll begin documentation immediately, Inspector. Though I should warn you, some of our solutions might strain credibility. I've already seen a hamster powering emergency communications, Captain, Graves replied dryly. I believe my credibility is sufficiently prepared. As the tension dissolved, the command staff returned to their stations with renewed purpose. What had begun as a regulatory disaster had somehow transformed into validation of their unorthodox approach to space station management. Rodriguez approached Graves as she prepared to depart. Thank you, Inspector. Your understanding of our situation is unexpected, but deeply appreciated. Graves regarded him with professional assessment. Don't mistake this for leniency, Captain. I expect Terra Omega to become the most thoroughly documented station in TSA history. Every improvisation, every adaptation must be recorded for proper evaluation. Of course, Rodriguez agreed. We'll maintain the highest standards of documentation going forward. See that you do. Graves handed him a new datapad, the latest model far more advanced than the outdated equipment the station had been using. This contains the formal documentation templates and direct communication protocols with my division. I expect weekly reports. Rodriguez accepted the pad with appropriate solemnity. We won't let you down, Inspector. As Graves and her team departed through the airlock, the command center erupted in relieved celebration. Lieutenant Walsh actually hugged the environmental control panel with its emoji warning stickers. Thompson rushed to engineering, presumably to inform Lieutenant Whiskers of his official recognition. Rodriguez returned to his captain's chair, running one hand over the worn armrest with its hidden patch of duct tape. The station would continue its mission, improvising as necessary, but now with official blessing. He picked up the new datapad and began the first entry. Terra Omega Station Operational Innovation Log, Day 1. 6 months later, the Galactic Council convened its quarterly session. The chamber had adapted to the presence of death at the human delegation, though several species still maintained enhanced protection fields when in proximity to the shadowy entity. The factual assessment of the Zoth claims against humanity had proceeded with unprecedented thoroughness, partly due to the gravity of the situation and partly due to the reluctance of many council functionaries to complete a process that would require announcing results in death's presence. Myra stood at the central podium, her diplomatic uniform now bearing a new insignia. A small, silver emblem depicting a human hand and a skeletal hand clasped in alliance. It had become the unofficial symbol of Earth's unique position in interstellar politics. The Council has reviewed all evidence presented by the Zoth Imperium regarding alleged human biological contamination. She stated, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. The assessment team has found no violations of established protocols. Earth's expansion has remained within all Council guidelines. High Speaker Volath confirmed the findings with a formal gesture of his luminescent appendages. The assessment is accepted without contest. The Zoth proposal for containment protocols is hereby dismissed. From the Zoth delegation, now reduced in size and prominence, came no visible reaction. Warlord Eternal had been recalled to Imperial territory months earlier, leaving only junior diplomats to represent Zoth interests. The confrontation with death had significantly diminished their political capital within the Council. Furthermore, Myra continued, Earth formally withdraws its counter-proposal for special recognition of expansion rights as existing Council protocols have been confirmed as sufficient and applicable. This diplomatic concession, withdrawing a demand they had already essentially won, generated approving murmurs throughout the chamber. Earth was demonstrating magnanimity in victory, a gesture not lost on the elder races. As Myra returned to her seat beside Death, the entity's shadowy form shifted slightly. A strategic withdrawal, it observed quietly. You secured your position without requiring formal acknowledgement. Appearing reasonable after victory often yields better long-term results than demanding formal concessions, Myra replied. Besides, we achieved our primary objective. The Zoth threat has been neutralized. For now, Death agreed. Though you realize our alliance has forever changed how the Council perceives humanity. Myra gazed across the chamber, noting how other delegations regarded the human section with new calculation in their eyes. Not merely fear of death, but reassessment of humanity itself. That was inevitable. Better to be respected than merely tolerated. Respect and fear often walk hand in hand, Death noted shadows swirling. Your species has chosen an unusual path in cosmic politics. We've always been good at finding unusual paths, Myra said with a small smile. It's what humans do when conventional options fail. On Terra Omega Station, Captain Rodriguez reviewed the quarterly performance metrics with satisfaction. The station gleamed with a blend of regulation-approved equipment and officially documented innovations. Lieutenant Whiskers had been promoted to commander and now supervised an entire rodent engineering corps, their exercise wheels providing emergency power to critical systems throughout the station. The Terran methodology, as it had become known throughout TSA territories, had spread to other frontline stations facing similar resource constraints. Regulatory compliance now included an innovation division headed by Inspector Graves, which evaluated and sometimes approved solutions that would have been considered violations just months earlier. Captain, called Communications Officer Martinez, priority message from TSA Command. On screen, Rodriguez replied, setting down his coffee mug. Now regulation approved with its humorous slogan, classified under Morale Enhancement, Directive 22. Admiral Hassan appeared looking considerably less stern than during their last communication. Captain Rodriguez, I'm pleased to inform you that Terra Omega has been selected as the prototype for the new Adaptive Station Initiative. Your documentation of operational innovations has transformed TSA engineering standards across the organization. Thank you, Admiral. The crew will be honored to hear it. There's more, Hassan continued. The initiative includes budget increases for selected stations, demonstrating exceptional efficiency. Terra Omega's allocation will increase by 40%, effective next quarter. Rodriguez maintained his professional demeanor, despite wanting to leap from his chair in celebration. "That's excellent news, sir. We'll put the additional resources to good use." "I'm sure you will, Captain. Though I must insist that Commander Whiskers receive his fair share of the upgraded facilities. His contribution to emergency communications has been noted at the highest levels." "I'll see to it personally, sir." After the communication ended, Rodriguez shared the news with his command staff, who received it with the dignified professionalism they had cultivated under Graves' mentorship, followed immediately by unrestrained celebration once the official acknowledgement had been properly logged. Later, in the privacy of his office, Rodriguez updated the captain's log that had once been a perfunctory duty, but had evolved into a meticulous record of Terra Omega's journey from regulatory disaster to innovation flagship. "Perhaps the most valuable lesson," he wrote, "is that systems must adapt to realities, rather than forcing realities to conform to systems." Terra Omega succeeded not by rejecting regulations entirely, but by honoring their purpose while finding new paths to achieve their goals. He paused, considering the philosophical turn his thoughts had taken, then added with a smile, "Also, never underestimate the power of a determined hamster with proper motivation." As night cycle began on the station, the lights dimmed automatically in non-essential areas, an energy-saving innovation that had started as a violation and become standard procedure. Through the observation window, the stars shone with unchanging brilliance, indifferent to the regulations and innovations of the beings who traveled among them. In one galaxy, humanity had forged an alliance with death itself, reshaping interstellar politics through audacious diplomacy. In another corner of the same vast cosmos, a space station had transformed bureaucratic failure into operational triumph through duct tape, hamster wheels, and stubborn determination. Both stories, though vastly different in scale, shared the same fundamental truth. Humanity's greatest strength lay not in political maneuvering or technological prowess, but in its relentless refusal to accept limitations as final. Death itself had acknowledged this quality. The bureaucracy of space administration had been forced to adapt to it. And somewhere in the vast expanse between cosmic powers and hamster wheels, the anomalous truth of humanity continued to unfold, one improvisation at a time.